How to retire early as a Washington State employee. So this video I'm going to be detailed enough that you're going to get a general idea of the steps you need to take to make early retirement a reality. Now I can't go into too much detail or the video is going to be really long, but I'm going to try to give you with the most important points. So when we think about retirement, a couple of things you need to think about first is what does those words mean to you? Because it is different for everybody. What does early mean to you and what does retirement mean to you? So in Washington State's eyes, in DRS's eyes, early retirement is any retirement before age 65 in which you start collecting your pension. Now, some people think 62 is early, some people consider 57 early or 55. It's your number, it's whatever you decide. Second is retirement. Do you want to be fully retired in the sense that you're not doing anything? Or do you want to do part-time? Is the part-time within the same job? Or are you looking to start your own business? Are you going to go do something in the private sector? So that's another thing you want to think about is what is retirement for you really. Now, once you get those things squared away, it's important to sit down and set out what your goals are. Once those things are in writing and you know what you're working towards, it's a lot easier to plan for. So the first thing you need to do is set up your spending plan. Some people call it a budget. So it's knowing where all of your dollars go. So you want to sit down and set up what your budgets are. And then you want to make sure you're tracking this. So you want to use some kind of app. Mint's a good one. That's one that I use, that you can kind of set up your budget or targets within there. And every transaction, whether it comes from your bank account or some credit cards, you're going to know what they are and what category they fall into. So you know if you're staying on budget or not. Now, the idea here is obviously the less you spend and the more you make, the more you have able to save, the earlier you'll be able to retire. Easier said than done. So when it comes to expenses, you want to try to minimize the things that you really aren't required. So obviously rent, mortgage, that kind of thing, you don't really have much control over that. They're kind of necessary. Same thing with food, water, and stuff like that. Eating out all the time, that's something you can probably scale back on. So you got to go through and figure out what's important to you and what can be cut out. Now, it is important to remember that certain things are important to us, even if don't make the most sense financially. They are important for our families, our relationships, our mental health. So like vacations, if all you did was work, never took a day of vacation in your life, you might be able to retire early, but you're going to miss out on so much opportunities. You may feel burnt out, depressed along the way. So taking time for you and your family and your spouse to go somewhere, have fun and recharge is actually considered in my book an investment into yourself and your family. I wouldn't totally write off vacations. Now, big elaborate vacations, maybe you can scale them back. It doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but it's important to take that kind of time so you can make sure you make it to retirement in a healthy state. Next thing you want to look for is taxes. Now, this gets overlooked by everybody, and I mean everybody. Nobody wants to sit down and think about taxes along their road, and usually don't worry about it until it's, in April or when they're retired. And by that time, it's too late. If all you're trying to do is react year by year, you're never going to get ahead of the IRS. So you need to have a tax plan that's 5-10 years long. When you're looking about taxes for early retirement, it like goes back to the age that we're going to retire at. So if our early retirement number is before age 59 and a half, we know that there are certain accounts that aren't going to work for us, right? So remember that money in an IRA that comes up before 59 and a half has a 10% penalty. So we want to make sure we don't have too much or all of our money in that type of account if we plan on retiring at 57 or 58. If retiring after that, then it doesn't matter. The 10% penalty is gone. Now, when it comes to the different retirement options that you guys have, remember that state employees, if you're on plan 3, you have your plan 3, obviously the pension, but then you have your defined contribution plan. That's known as a 401A plan, different than 401k. Rules are pretty much similar. You have to be separated for you to access the money from it. But the money does come out without 10% penalty once you're over the age of 55. So if you want to retire at 55 or a little bit after that, plan 3, a defined contribution side of it, not a bad way to have money saved. When it comes to your deferred compensation plan, right, the DCP or 457, those don't have any 10% penalties. So it doesn't matter what age you decide to separate, retire, and draw the money from, there is no 10% penalty. You still pay taxes on it, but there's no penalty. The Roth IRAs, your contribution can come out anytime you want to. The interest has to stay in there until you are 59 and a half, or accounts at least 5 years old, whichever is later. So Roth IRAs are not a bad tool to have for early retirement, but know that a good chunk of the interest that you've accumulated hands off until you hit age 59 and a half. 403Bs also access at age 55. And then some people like to use cash for your life insurance. That money, when you take it out as a withdrawal or a loan, can come out at any time. There's no 10% penalty on it. Now, the tax implications are going to vary, but that's a topic for another day. Now, in addition to just looking at the whole 10% penalty thing, which a lot of people focus maybe a little bit too much on, is looking at how is the overall money is going to be taxed. Is this a pre-tax account in the sense that every dollar gets taxed? Is it a Roth account in which none of the money is taxed after I paid it initially? Or is it what's known as a brokerage account where only the gains are taxed at a capital gains rate? So those are the three kind of tax buckets you want to be saving into. Most people put their heads down, they have all their money in DCP, 403B, Plan 3, and they get to retirement and they have like $1 million all pre-tax, and then they have to pay tax on every single bit of it. Scary thing there is if taxes go up in the future, you have no flexibility. If you need money out of that account, you have to take it out and pay it at that higher rate. And if you hit requirement distribution age, that money has to come out and you have to pay it at that rate. So they're going to force you to take the money out and pay the higher taxes down the road. So that's where things like the Roth accounts come into place. Now, obviously, Roth makes most sense when you're going to be in a higher tax bracket on the road. If you're starting off, that may be kind of too distant to really know it. But if you're early in your career and you know that you're going to be making more money down the road, then Roth may not be a bad idea. That's something you definitely want to consult with a professional with. But making sure you have a tax plan in place and you know when to do the conversions, which accounts work best for you, that can easily save you hundreds, if not $1 million in taxes paid over the course of your lifetime. Now, next topic is going to be insurance. Now, no one likes to talk about insurance. Most of us just go the cheap route because you don't want to be forking money over to the insurance company every single month with no benefit. However, keep in mind that the whole point of insurance is to help protect you in the event that you have some kind of liability or damages. If you have your home paid off, you can easily say, hey, I don't want home insurance anymore. But if your roof blows off, that can cost you quite a bit of money. Same thing when it goes to your car insurance. There's a lot of people out there that run the bare minimum limits. They have $10,000, $25,000 coverage total. Now, $10,000 doesn't go very far these days. And if you were to ever rear end someone, like a CEO or some attorney, what are the chances that their medical damage or their financial compensation that they're due for that accident is going to be more than that $10,000 or $25,000 coverage that you have? Chances are it's pretty darn high. And if you are running the minimums while you have $500,000 sitting in Plan 3, chances are they're going to come after that Plan 3 asset. So the rule of thumb I always like to make is you want to make sure that your liability coverages are either the same or in excess of your retirement assets. So I want to make sure I have more of the car insurance company's money in force than I have my own money saved. So if something happens, they can take their money and not mine. Now, next category is going to be your healthcare. So healthcare, very expensive unless you have an employer that covers, all or most of it for us. But if we're looking at early retirement, we know that we're going to be on the hook for that at some point in the future. And if we're used to our employer paying all of it, it can become quite a big shock. So when it comes to dealing with healthcare, first thing I want to look into is the PEB retiree coverage. Now, this is only available if you are working for a PEB covered employer. So some of the cities in Washington aren't covered by this program, but every school district is. So depending on where you're at, that's the first thing you want to check into, because they too can have pretty reasonable rates for retirees. Now, you might be able to find something cheaper in the private sector. If that's the case, you can always defer coverage on this to a later date, because if you don't defer coverage, you just opt out of PEB altogether, the program's done, you can never get back into it. PEB is only available for public employees, so it's kind of competitive in the sense, and they kind of limit how much premiums can increase year to year. So it's a great benefit to have, and I never want to see somebody totally opt out and cancel it, because you could find yourself down the road paying a crazy amount of insurance in the private market, where you could have just stayed in the public one and got it for much cheaper. Now, if you are young or in just really good health and you really don't use insurance a lot, looking at something like an HSA, a health savings account, is a really good idea. This is only available on high deductible plans. So high deductible plans are going to be the cheapest ones out there. They come with HSA, which is the option to save more into this type of account. But remember that if you do need the care, you're going to have to pay a lot more out of pocket before the insurance company starts kicking in. Again, if you're young, you hardly go to the doctor. Use is usually a pretty good option for most people. All right, now that we got the basics out of the way, let's keep going on this thing. All right, so now we got all of that, our basics covered. Let's keep on going. So rule of thumb is always going to be to start saving as early as possible. Save as much as you can. Now, remember that you have the DCP, 403Bs, Roth IRAs to save money into. Those are all flexible accounts. You're not locked into it. So you can always put money into it. And if it's ever too much or some bills come up, you can always reduce it or shut off completely. So I always like to encourage people to put more money than they think they can save into these accounts. It's really just to challenge them and their budgets. And chances are, if you see that money, if you see less money coming in, you're going to try to figure out a way to make it work. Worst case, it can't work. You can just reduce the amount you're contributing into the account. Now, if you are a state employee, remember that you should always be saving any raises that you get in the future. So if you know next year you're going to go from making $50,000 to $55,000, if you want to try to save as much of that $5,000 raise as you can. The worst thing you can do is don't save any of it. That money's going to come, and you're more likely going to find a way to spend it. And the same thing year after year. And that's how people end up with lifestyle inflation, where they're making, $150,000, $200,000, and they still have trouble saving that $500,000 a month. So every year you're going to increase, make sure you are increasing your savings. All right. So the next tip is going to be about increasing your income. Remember that the only thing stopping you from retiring today is you don't have monthly recurring income to cover your bills. So once we have that, then we can retire. So that's what Social Security does. That's what our pension helps us do. And that's currently what our salary does for us. So if we can increase our income, that's going to increase our pension payouts. It's going to allow us to save more so we can get to our goals quicker. And the goal obviously being, if we can save up to a critical amount where the interest is enough to live off of, that's kind of what you're shooting for. So ways to increase income. Also, you can go out and buy rental properties if you have the know-how and assets to do so. That's one way to get income coming in. You can start your side jobs, but the easiest thing to do for most people is to try to increase their skill set. So if I can go and get my master's degree, which in a school district setting is on your pay scale, you know exactly how much of a benefit financially you're going to get from that. You can become nationally board certified, you can coach, you can pick up any kind of extra work around the district. Anything you can do will help increase your income, which is going to, again, transfer to a higher pension payout for the rest of your life, more money in your pocket that you can turn around and put into your savings. Now, I always like to stress here that it is okay to take a step back or even a pause on your retirement savings journey for you to pursue things like your master's degree or becoming nationally board certified, because we know that once we get that, the income that's going to produce for us is going to totally offset the money or investment earnings we missed out on by taking that break or pause from saving them. Now, one thing we haven't talked about yet is debt and debt management. And, should we pay that off before we start savings? My opinion on the matter is, as long as the interest rates are at a reasonable amount, and I think I can earn more than that in the stock market, I recommend saving over paying off the debts. Now, everyone's different. Some people really like the whole debt-free mindset. That's really not my mantra. And a case in point is, if I can be saving over time, I have a growing asset. If my money goes towards the debt goes down each month, the interest also decreases. So over time, while my money goes to paying off the principal, which helps speed up the payment on it, you're really saving less and less each year because the interest payment is going down. The stock market side, it's going to be compounding because I have my initial investment, it's going to earn interest, plus I put money into it. Then that earns interest, and then I put more into it. So it compounds and grows much quicker. So as long as I have reasonable interest rates and I know I can earn more than the stock market, I usually recommend going the savings route. So one quick example of that is if you are in a place where you had, say, a mortgage and you're paying, 2%, 3%, 3.5% on it, while you could be putting more money into it, you're only going to be saving, the slightest interest rate. But if you're able to put money in a way, so today's rates, if you look at high yield savings accounts, they pay 4, 4.3, maybe 4.5 now. If you could put money into an account that paid 4.5, obviously it's going to generate interest in excess of what that mortgage would have been. You've in a sense created an arbitrage. You're making more money from that. So example, if you had a mortgage that you owed $100,000 on, and I offered to give you the $100,000, and you had the option to pay off the mortgage and you'd save, your 3.5%, or you could just turn around and put it in a savings account and earn 4% on it. You'd be making more money by saving it. Yeah, you're going to pay the interest, but because the interest on the savings course is higher than what you'd be paying on the mortgage side, you're going to make more money by investing in that case. So that's the kind of arbitrage you're trying to look for when doing your, debt repayment structures. Now, outside of that, if you are in the place where you are paying off debt, I like to utilize the avalanche strategy, which essentially is organizing your debts from highest interest to the lowest interest. And you want to be focused on paying off the highest interest one first, because that's the one that's costing you the most money. Now, some people like to go highest debt to lowest debt and things like that, and they try to use the snowball where they pay the lowest one off and they roll it over. However, if my lowest debt is only charging me $2,000 and it's charging me only 3%, why would I focus putting all my money into that when I have a debt in the mid-range that's charging 25%? I'm saving a lot more money interest by focusing on the higher interest rate one. So that's my strategy on paying off debt. It's called the avalanche technique. So obviously, once you have the higher interest ones paid off, you can obviously roll it down just like the snowball. If you're looking for ways to kind of speed up that, you can always look into things like 403B loans. So if you have money in a 403B program or 401k, you can loan the money out, and that can help you restructure debt. You can pay it off. Then the money you pay back goes to you. All the interest goes to you, so you pay yourself back over time. Another really good tool is using something like a cash out refinance, in which you tap into some of the equity in your home. It comes to you as a tax-free, cash withdrawal. You can pay off all of your debts. Obviously, the mortgage is going to change because it's pretty much a new mortgage. Depending on where interest rates are at, you can then start repaying it back over time, usually at a much lower interest rate. So case in point, back in 2021, interest rates were low. I did the same thing. I did a cash out refi, took $100,000 out of the home here, paid off some of our debt. And it just so happens that our old interest rate was 5%. When I did the cash out refi, we got like a 3.75. So our overall mortgage, even though we are going to owe $100,000 more than we did initially, our mortgage payment went up, I think, $100 a month. So it actually worked out to be a really good deal, considering we're saving a couple hundred, if not 1,000 or more now on the monthly payments from the debt we paid off. So just an example of how you can utilize that strategy to pay off your debt. All right, so now next step in the process is you want to get yourself a savings goal. Now stay away from big round numbers like 500,000 or $1 million or something like that, because they really don't mean much on the surface. You got to figure out what that means for you and how much your situation actually needs. The way I do this is you can use the rule of either 4%. I use 5% if you structure properly. And that's the percentage you can draw from your assets. So if I have $100,000 and I take out 5%, that's $5,000. So for every $100,000 I've saved, I know I can get $5,000 out for income each year. All right, so the math works out. So if I know I need $5,000 per month for my retirement, from 5,000, of course, 12 months is $60,000. You take your 60,000 divided by the 5%, it gives you 1.2 million. So it means I need 1.2 million to generate that $60,000 per year. Now, obviously, if you have other income, you can reduce that number by. So if I have pension, Social Security, and I only need $2,000 per month, then the math works the same way. I need $2,000 per month, which is $24,000 a year. I divide it by my withdrawal rate, 5% so it gives me 480,000, rounded up, call it $500,000. In that case, you only need $500,000 to generate the income that you need. So that's how you would do savings goals. Don't just set out numbers out of the blue. Figure out how much income you need that to generate and work backwards. Now, up until now, I haven't said anything about investment strategy or anything like that. And really is because it doesn't matter all that much. As long as you're consistently putting money away on a monthly basis, you figure out the tax component to it, and you get yourself a relatively cheap fund, it's more like you're going to do okay over time. So I don't recommend picking individual stocks unless you know what you're doing. And I'm a big advocate for the target date funds because they typically don't have enough risk in your early years and have too much risk in your later years. So you want to have something kind of custom built to you. If you're doing it on your own, just stick with some kind of index fund, large cap that tracks S&P 500. You can do pretty well for a while. But keep in mind that when you start getting to the danger zone, about 10 years out from retirement, that's when you want to start taking a deeper look. You want to start diversifying outside of that. So look for international, global, mid cap, small cap. You want to start getting into different categories that track different asset classes. So diversification is important, but stressing and honing and doing all this research on which Vanguard fund's best for me and should I buy Apple or this or that, oftentimes it doesn't really matter. You want to just stay focused, keep it simple, put money away every month, make sure you have a relatively good ETF or index fund you're putting money into, and it should track pretty well. Now, as you get closer to the retirement window here in Washington, there's a couple things you need to look for. So you want to see if you're vested in your pension. Vesting in your pension is 5 years on plan 2, 10 years in plan 3. Vested, that means you're going to be eligible for your pension. So if you have at least 30 years of service, you're eligible at 62. If you don't have 30 years, you can't get it to 65. Does not mean you have to work to those ages. That's just the age you can get it in full without taking any kind of penalty. I've done multiple videos on, it doesn't make sense to take it before 65 or 62 and how that works out. You can feel free to check those out if you're interested in that. If you want me to save you some time, for people on plan 3, going 2 years early, it's questionable if it's going to work out in the best interest in the long run. For plan 2, more likely it does work out. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before I leave you guys is what do I do about the DRS annuities? So the annuities, the way they work out is they have a payout rate based on your age and how much money you put into there. Obviously, the older you are, the higher they're going to pay out. The younger you are, the less they pay out. So if you're thinking about using the TAP annuity, for example, and you put $100,000 into it, the payout rate's 5%. I get 5% of the $100,000. It's $5,000 per year of annual income guaranteed for the rest of my life. With the TAP annuity, remember that you have to purchase it with money from the TRS3 account. Can't come from any other source. If you move the money from TRS3 to an IRA, you just took that option off the table. You can't get it back. So it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. Now you can buy it whenever you want to, as long as you separate service. So you can buy it the year you separate. You can let Sin Plan 3 wait 3 years and do it then. It's up to you. There's no deadline on when you can purchase the TAP annuity from the state. The money just has to remain in Plan 3 for that. The other annuities, what they call the plan or the service credit annuities. So if you want to purchase service credit, or you want to use like the TERS annuity, which is available to Plan 2 members, that has a 90-day window on it. So if you retire and 90 days go by and you don't make the decision, those annuities are off the table as well. And at that point, if you want an annuity, you have to go to the private market. You can't get anything from the DRS. So those are the key deadlines to look for if you're trying to retire. Now, obviously, if you're doing early retirement, it may not make the most sense to purchase an annuity earlier. So in that case, TAP annuity is going to be the one that you want to keep your eye on. And if you want to go the private market route, you certainly can. In my experience, the payout rates aren't there. They don't come with cost of living adjustments. And if you do, it's a thing you have to purchase. And it's a purchase in the form of either they're going to tack on a fee to it, or they're going to reduce the payout rate. So they're going to knock you from a 5% rate down to 4.5, 4.2. So they're going to get their money one way or the other for that benefit. So because the state doesn't charge for that, it's going to be usually the best deal in terms of guaranteed income. So it's something you should strongly consider before saying no or moving your money elsewhere. Now, I did make a retirement timeline guide that I have on the website. You can get that by going to WashingtonTERSPERS.com. That's WATRSPERS.com. That's a brand new blog we created that's all about your state retirement benefits. So go ahead and check that out. Remember to leave any comments below, and I'll catch you guys all later. And remember that your future depends on what you do today.